Joe, good to see you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us. So Route 9B is a cybersecurity firm. First, give us the lay of the land. How vulnerable is our infrastructure to cyber attacks?
Well, I think it's the single greatest threat in the country. And part of our problem is if you were to ask J.P. Morgan Chase, Home Depot, Target, Sony, what do they have in common? It's not that they got hacked. It's that they got hacked after spending $1.2 billion on their firewalls. So an automated firewall or approach to cyber doesn't work. You need the human element, the operator out of the NSA who understands the enemy. How are they going to enter or exploit your enterprise? And they know because they've grown up with it. So the private sector is ill-prepared, and we need to collaborate with those specialists. That's, I think, the best way to approach this.
What does Donald Trump need to do?
Well, I think he has to talk to the people at NSA. Number two, when I was chairman of the Homeland Security Advisory Council after 9/11, we attempted to be able to collaborate with the private sector by sharing transactional data. The government would not indemnify the corporation, so no corporation is going to take that risk of sharing the data. But in a secure environment, we should collaborate with the private sector. We should engage these private operators so that we can go mano a mano with the people sitting in China in the high-rise.
Who are the most dangerous enemies right now? Is it state actors in China, state actors in Russia, or is it private sector hackers just
I would say Russia, number one, John. Then I would go North Korea, Iran, the usual suspects. But primarily, Russia's very active, so is China, so is North Korea.
What about in terms of intellectual property and sort of using the internet, using these breakdowns in systems to steal intellectual property? Places like China.
Well, that, as you know, has been going on for decades. They have been disintermediating our country in terms of IP, but even with the government. But what's happening now, they're segueing away from the U.S. government IP to the commercial sector. And I think they've realized that you can disintermediate with identity theft and taking money out of banks, et cetera, by going to the private sector and create as much damage. So again, I think it's a wake-up call. I'm glad to hear President-elect taking it on, but you need the collaboration of the human component with the automated firewalls.
How long do you think this is going to take, what Donald Trump is talking about? Are we talking about years, Joe?
I think you are. I think you're talking about a decade.
What is it entailed in that? What's entailed in that decade? Take us behind the
numero
curtain.
uno, training. My CISO, my CTO at UBS, very professional individual, but never trained in cyber. Not one iota in cyber. That's why I'm suggesting to you there are about 35, or were 35 what we call journeymen, in the bowels of the NSA, the best that the country has ever produced. My company, fortunately, has 25 of them. They are training the Air Force and other entities throughout the country, including the private sector. We need to get that training done so that we can raise the awareness level with the professionals we have already embedded in our corporate structure.
But how do you even keep up with the pace of technology? You know, I think about back in 1996, almost 21 years ago, when I was at the Naval Academy and somebody handed me this disc and said, this thing's called Netscape. Is anyone interested in this? And one guy in our company was, even interested in it. The technology is changing so fast, so if this takes decades, how do you keep up with it when we're competing with these cyber actors?
Well, fortunately, at least in my company, because we associate with NSA and Cyber Command, et cetera, we are seeing the newest and greatest new threats. And through collaborative effort, we say, what can we do about this new threat? They bring it in. What can we do to fix this? What can we defend ourselves with? And how do we go on the offense? All of that's transpiring, but that's the methodology going forward that has to take place. The technology becomes more and more sophisticated. The hacker themselves are more and more sophisticated. And we just have to recognize that. But I tell you, training is the #1 priority relative to this battle of cyber.
Joe, can you put on your markets hat for a second?
Yes.
We've been talking all morning about this market rally. We're going to see 19,000 maybe later this morning. Is this rally sustainable, and what would you say is behind it?
Well, John, I've been wrong. Last time I was on this show, the market was at 18.7, the Dow, and I had suggested we're vulnerable to a 10 to 20% contraction. I've been wrong. But frankly, what this is all about is in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So the money's coming here. In the last year, over $400 billion of foreign investment came into the U.S. And the buybacks of U.S. corporations have exceeded $590 billion, which is a record going all the way back to 2007. So that's going on. And EPS is benefiting from both of those, frankly. I think the market is a bit overbought. I think that at 23 PE multiple is a little bit historically high. I still think there's going to be somewhat of a contraction. But right now, there's nowhere else to go. It's the U.S.
And you got a growth plan on the economy. Now, one of the president-elect's plans is for regulation and rolling it back. He says for every new regulation, 2 existing regulations must be eliminated. So, Joe, as a businessman, how important is this rollback of regulations?
Relative to corporate America, hiring in the economy, probably numero uno.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Dodd-Frank was put in 2010. 400 brand new rules to corporate America. 200 have been inculcated. Now, I can't validate this, but what I've read, 24 million labor hours to absorb those 200 rules in corporate America. To put that in perspective, the building of the Panama Canal was only 20 million. So the propensity to absorb this is really dragging down corporate America to a degree. And some of these rules are, frankly, overkill. So I think we have to take a sensible approach and reduce the regulation and get the economy moving in a practical fashion.
And it's everywhere. It's financials, Dodd-Frank, it's EPA, it's Obamacare.
Yes, no, it's number one. And I like what I'm hearing from Trump right now. I think that the 1 for 2, I don't know how pragmatic that is.
It's good. I think it's a good idea.
It's good. And I also think if I were advising him, I would set a tone on this wealth effect. I would go with a $10 minimum wage, and I would commit 50 cents a year for the next 10 years until we get to 15. And by the way, I would lower corporate taxes 5 points to offset the increased labor costs simultaneously.